Hey, welcome all. I am Alan Boston, the host of a, for now, unnamed podcast. We will get to all that later. I do want everyone to know it's my first attempt at doing a podcast, and it could get a little rough around the edges, but that's my demeanor anyway, so at least there'll be a little consistency here. The podcast eventually is going to evolve into a teaching podcast. What I hope I can eventually do is teach all the fundamentals of sports betting the way I learned them, and ultimately you'll add your own twist to it, and you'll be able to handicap on your own to whatever level you want to do it. That's the ultimate goal, but today's goal is we're going to run through the NCAA tournament, and that's probably not a bad idea given it's March Madness time. Before I get to that, I'd like to congratulate Circa Racing Sportsbook for posting a line almost immediately that they made up on their own, taking $10,000 a shot on those games, and finally allowing this old man to feel like he's young again. That's the way it was done in the 70s and 80s. That is not how it's evolved. I am glad that there is someone out there that knows what they're doing well enough to have the fortitude to open their own line and understand that opening a line and moving it on bets is the proper way to book. So congrats, Matt Metcalf and his staff at Circa for doing an amazing job. And on to the games. I'm going to start with the first four and then work my way through every game. Some will be brief, some will be more in tune. I will not do much about the teaching thing here. I'm just going to babble, which is something I am very good at. We are starting with Norfolk State, Appalachian State. I will tell you that my number in this game is Appalachian State 1.5. And by a number, I mean my power rating. A power rating is a guess at how good a team is. It is ever evolving throughout the year, and we will get into how I begin my power rating and how I change it next year. For now, I believe Appalachian State should be 1.5. And therefore, if this game got to 3.5, I'd be inclined to bet a little bit on Norfolk State. 2 points away from 1.5, where you win on 2 and 3, is a pretty serious thing. However, when I say App State 1.5, I'm not entirely comfortable with that number. Typically, this game would be more in the range of 4. Norfolk State had a home run year this year, a very potent, powerful tournament. They had good wins in the pre-conference at James Madison, which is really good right now, and at George Mason. The coach is excellent. Robert Jones, his defensive fundamentals are brilliant, actually. And watching the team in their conference tournament, I was actually impressed. However, what App State did, winning 4 games in 4 days, beating the top 3 teams in the league, was even better. Their coach, Kearns, is one of the best for sure. It's only a matter of time before he has a bigger job. And for now, I am not betting this game, and if it got to 3.5, it would only be a very small play. Mount St. Mary's and Texas Southern is next, and I made Texas Southern 1. By the way, I'm doing all this off the top of my head. I hope I remember enough to not have to look through my 3-ring binders. We'll get into this a little bit more later, but I still do 3-ring binders, pen and paper, which everyone can do. A friend commented that it could be a little intimidating thinking about programming numbers and writing code and creating algorithms, etc. So I'm hoping that with pen, paper, and a little bit of an IQ, people will be able to do this on their own to whatever extent they feel. And I'll certainly be open to answering questions, but that's for a later day. I'm just letting you know that this is not what the podcast ultimately will be about, but for now, we're doing it that. So I made Texas Southern 1. The issue here is the complete coaching mismatch. We have Engelstad from Mount St. Mary's, who's done an excellent job, and even losing his point guard at mid-semester to the dreaded transfer portal. Reworked things, used several big men, and plotted his way through. He made, I forget his name, Donkey or something. I'm not good with names or how teams play, and I'll get to that in a minute. But he became the point guard and the stud, the do-all for Mount St. Mary's, and they were very impressive in in winning their conference tournament, surprising me by winning in Bryant. Texas Southern, James Jones, loaded with talent, especially Michael Weathers, who took over the semifinal, hit a 3 at the buzzer to get them overtime versus Jackson State, and then another 3 to put them ahead, and ultimately get them to the finals where they upset Prairie View in a very surprising result to this handicapper. The game has gone from 2.5 Texas Southern to pick. I think that's probably the right move. Texas Southern is clearly the better team, but they're clearly a mismatch in coaching, so I'll leave this game very much alone. Wichita State and Drake. Drake, the unlucky Drake Bulldogs last year, just ravaged by injuries, and this year, once again, losing their best player and then another one of their top players to injury. One of them's gone for the year, but Hempel will be back for this tournament. He is important to Drake. But what's most important to Drake is Darren DeVry, who is a wizard on the sidelines. He has done incredible work in Des Moines, which is not much of a city and has expensive hotels for some reason, but that's for another day. Wichita State had the unpolitical correctness of Greg Marshall lead to his dismissal or resignation or whatever it was, and he said something mean to somebody, and oh my God, you can't do that nowadays. Don't say anything mean to the coach. These people wouldn't have lasted in my era because the coach could kill a kid and get away with it because it was called you respect the coach. Anyway, that's a minor aside. So with no Greg Marshall, Wichita State continued on with Brown and had a very good year. Winning at home against Houston and playing Houston tough on the road is massively impressive. However, they were definitely a team that lacked consistency. They didn't always take good shots, and against Drake, that is a recipe for disaster. My number in the game is pick, and I did bet something on Drake +2, but that number is long gone, and at the current number, I would leave it alone. I hope I'm not going too fast, but we're trying to get this in and not bore people ultimately. Michigan State and UCLA, a battle of two teams who probably do not belong in the tournament, but I'm not going to get into that. So my number in this is UCLA 1, which is going to surprise a lot of people. The money is for Michigan State. In fact, it opened UCLA 1, and now Michigan State is up to 2 and maybe even 2.5. And so, of course, I am betting UCLA. Now, the question is, when I have a team 1 and the other team's 2.5 or 2, is that a big bet? And typically the answer is yes. In this instance, the answer is no. And why is that? Well, UCLA has lost a couple players to injury, and their power rating has plummeted as a result. They ended the year losing several games in a row, including blowing a 16-point lead to Oregon State in the first round of the conference tournament. However, Mick Cronin is excellent, knows absolutely what he's doing. His team will be very well prepared. And one might think that, he's facing Tom Izzo. But to my view, Tom Izzo's kind of lost his mind the last few years. I still respect the guy. He tries to do things the right way, theoretically. But his lack of point guard has made this team almost unwatchable at times. Their offense sucks. His defensive fundamentals are still good, but they're not overwhelmingly good. And his poor shot selection, because of the lack of point guard, has led to many a poor game by them and many a blowout by them. This is not a good Michigan State team. All their wins have been in very good situations, and most notably the last game of the year where they played Michigan. They had played Michigan at Michigan the game before, got blown out, and that clinched the 1 seed for Michigan. It clinched the Big Ten title for Michigan. So they went into Michigan State without much pizzazz and got blown out, and that actually probably clinched Michigan State's NCAA berth. So one team had a lot of motivation, one team didn't. So you cannot really give credit to Michigan State for that win. I did not. I did bet UCLA +2, and I believe it's probably maybe even see 2.5, which will get me to bet more at +3 -20, and that's called buying, and that's for another day. But for now, I think Cronin will have his team ready enough, and he's excellent defensively, and that really should make Michigan State's life miserable. The total I saw was 136.5. I think it's gone down to like 135, but that seems kind of high. Like UCLA is very challenged offensively, and as I talked about, Michigan State's piss poor offense is playing now an elite defense or a very good defense at least. They're going to have trouble scoring, so maybe under might be worth looking at here. So Thursday's done, and we move on to wherever we move on to. I don't even know where we go in the West. So Gonzaga plays the winner of the Norfolk State App State game. I'm not going to talk about that. There's no line, and they're going to win by 100. They're probably going to be 30-ish on the number, just so you have an idea. So we go to Oklahoma, Missouri. An old Big 12 battle with Missouri now switching to the Southeast Conference, as teams are apt to do now because it's all about money. Tradition does not matter anymore. I made this game pick. The line currently is Oklahoma 2. So do you want to bet Missouri? And for now, the answer is no. Lon Kruger at Oklahoma rarely loses first-round NCAA tournament games. He's excellent at exposing other teams' defensive flaws. He always has his team in position to take good shots, which they do at a very high rate. Missouri started this year off with all 5 starters back. In a year of COVID, having 5 starters back is even more of an edge than prior years because there was very little practice before the season started. There were no exhibition games. There was nothing to start, but Missouri had all this experience coming back, and it didn't bother them as much as other teams. For instance, Oakland University, who had 3 practices total before their first game, and the coach was so, at a loss that he just threw a zone defense in, something he hasn't played in 30-something years of his life, and stuck with it the whole year. So sometimes good things happen from pandemics. That being said, both these teams are difficult to evaluate for me. Oklahoma typically plays to about a 90 rating, and Missouri typically plays lower, but this is a very good Missouri team. This is all of Quanzo Martin's recruits, and they're all experienced. They're all been there, done that. But I'm a little disturbed by losing to LSU on senior day at home and then losing to Arkansas in the conference tournament. I was not overly impressed. So I'm not sold that Missouri is as good as I have them rated. As for Oklahoma, again, I have them rated a little higher than what is typical for them. About 9 or 10 games ago, we went to this 4 outlook that brought some very good offensive displays. They won like 3 or 4 in a row using that, but people film that and catch up to them, and they ended the year losing several games in a row. So both these teams come in on shaky ground. Both these teams come in on ratings that I'm not overly comfortable with. I think 2.5, I would be certainly looking to bet Missouri, but as for now, I'm just going to leave it alone. Creighton and Cal Santa Barbara. Well, this is kind of a simple expose here. That's not the right word, is it? Fuck. Anyway, so I've had Creighton at a 96 rating forever. I've had Cal Santa Barbara at an 87 rating forever. We will learn that as a good thing. If you have the right number in a team and can stick with it, you figure to make good prices. So I'm very comfortable with both my power ratings in these teams. So subtracting 96 and 87, even though I wasn't a math major, that comes to 9. The game was 6.5 at one point, and in fact, I did bet Creighton. At least I hope I bet Creighton. I don't even know if I did. We'll figure that out later. At minus 6.5. At minus 7, it's a little dicey. It's worth a small bet. As far as kind of a matchup thing, which is not my gig, by the way, I'm a logic guy. I don't know a heck of a lot about basketball. I should throw that in. So as to what these teams run and everything, you'll have to listen to someone else. I do know Pasternak runs a lot of set plays at Santa Barbara, and that McDermott at Creighton is just terrific, terrific offensively. But this year his team is also excellent defensively, which is unusual for Creighton. And when you have a myriad of set plays, you just need to film it. And I think Creighton will be able to handle anything Santa Barbara throws at them. I think the game will very much play to 9, if not more. I don't think Santa Barbara will mind a rapid pace. They're senior dominated. They have some athletes. And they don't want to get into a track meet with Creighton. They want to maybe try to get a half-court game and run their sets. But I think Creighton will handle it. Their defense has been much better this year, and I would look to them to win and cover this game. Virginia and Ohio U is very hard to talk about. Virginia had a positive COVID test during the ACC tournament. It canceled the game. They are in lockdown. They are doing their practices through Zoom. So they are sitting in the room, staring at a computer, and hopefully have bands or machines or something to stay active, because it's kind of cruel, the shit that they have to go through. Like Chris Mooney said it best, the coach at Richmond, like, how can 20-year-old Division I athletes have the same protocol as an 80-year-old human being, right? But that's what they've done, and I get it. I mean, you don't want the shit to hit the fan when you're being greedy just by running this thing the whole way. So they're being a little extra careful and torturing the poor kids because, who cares? They're just like collateral damage. It's all about the money. Anyway, so Virginia opened 10.5, and the money very quickly piled in Ohio U, as it figured to. They made a mistake opening it that high because Virginia's not going to be able to practice. They're going to get to the bubble on Thursday. Well, they call it the bubble. I call it an arena. But they're going to get to the bubble on Thursday. They're going to take their COVID tests, and if they all shine, we all shine on. Yeah, we can go to a song, right? If they all test negative, then they'll all play. They'll practice Friday, and they'll play Ohio U on Saturday. Where does that leave them? I thought Virginia was going to be in a world of shit anyway. I watched Ohio U play, which I don't watch many teams play, but they were mega impressive. Bowles is terrific. He's part of the Stony Brook pickle tree, or pickle, I don't know how to pronounce his name. They all know what they're doing, especially this guy. This is just an amazing job he's done. Their offense is mega efficient, and the ball just doesn't hit the floor, just spins around at 100 miles an hour, and they find one of their shooters, which they have many, and they hit a lot of threes, and they do it at a very high rate, and they do it at a very efficient rate. They have enough athletes Virginia's not the most athletic of teams. They get by on just giving nothing away and terrific coaching. But Ohio U is just as well coached, if not better. The talent gap isn't that much. The fact that Virginia's been in lockdown and Ohio U is playing better and better and better with a now healthy Preston at point guard. He was hurt earlier, but the freshman came in and actually played very well, so that gave him another body to bring in and be effective. I'd say Virginia's in a world of shit here, and maybe some Ohio U money line, because it's probably kind of an all or nothing thing. Either that lockdown bothered Virginia, or they got rested and focused, and they'll be ready to play because they're athletes. They probably maybe did enough in the arena, and they'll scout them on Zoom. They'll be able to figure out what Ohio U does. It's just a matter of one day is enough to get them ready, because Ohio U's offense is not the simplest to solve. So I think Ohio U in the money line, and perhaps even a straight bet on Ohio U. My line is 7, by the way. I had this much lower anyway. And, I think this line will go back up when Virginia all test negative and they all say, all right, we're all ready to play. We're all ready to go. It'll probably go back up a little bit. I've been very high on Ohio U compared to the market, and the line is down to 7 now and 7.5. So my having it 7 means it probably should be like 9, 9.5 anyway. And we'll see what happens there. But, maybe some Ohio U money line. That kind of makes sense. So USC plays the winner of Wichita Drake, and that'll be an interesting game, which I'm not going to discuss because I don't know who they're playing. Kansas and Eastern Washington. Kansas, another team that had a positive test, but basketball in Kansas is the do-all, end-all, and the rules are different state to state, and Kansas is at the bubble practicing. They're down a starter, 12 points, 8 rebounds, something like that, a little bit more on both. Good player, but they have a lot of bodies. They have a lot of talent. I can't say I know a lot about Eastern Washington. I do know that earlier in the year they went to Arizona, lost by 3, and went to St. Mary's and gave them fits too. So they are capable of hanging with some of the better teams, but this was kind of a bad St. Mary's team and kind of a bad Arizona team. Props for hanging in there. It's still a solid effort, but I think the defense is a little shaky, and Kansas is a different animal than Arizona and St. Mary's. And my number on the game is 9 or 9.5, depending on how much I knock for the injury. And the line currently is 10.5, but I would just leave it alone. I just think I'm not so sure Eastern Washington can stop Kansas. I think the talent gap might be too big, and ultimately a blowout might happen. Almost, well, no, I don't want to compare it to the Northeast. Northeast is a different world. So anyway, that's that. Oregon and VCU. Oregon. My number in this game is 3.5. Oregon. However, my number on the finale of the Atlantic 10 tournament between St. Bonnie and VCU was pick. The game closed 3.5, and I did not change VCU's rating for getting beat pretty badly in that game. It kind of just didn't go their way, and I kind of like just tossed it and stuck with the number I've had on VCU almost the entire year. Oregon, riddled with injuries the entire year, finally got healthy at year's end and could perhaps even played a higher number. I would be betting Virginia Commonwealth at +6, but with some reservations. The coach for Oregon, Dana Altman, has been terrific in the NCAA tournament for years and years and years. At Creighton especially, he used to pull out a myriad of presses and defenses and junk defenses and straight-up defenses and everything in the book he has available. He used to run a myriad of set plays at Creighton. He switched that a little bit at Oregon. But he's got a lot in his arsenal. He knows what to do with it. He's absolutely terrific. I do like Mike Rhodes at VCU too, but their performance against St. Bonnie in the conference tournament final was a bit disappointing, albeit their point guard had 3 fouls 6 minutes into the game, and then they had a technical foul go against him, and then they actually got back into the game, and St. Bonnie hit a 3 with a guy in his face as the shot clock was at 0, and then hit another the next possession, and that was the end of the game. So it really wasn't as bad as it seemed for VCU. They're certainly capable of hanging with Oregon, who hasn't shown really a heck of a lot this year. They've had their moments, but it's more that I know Altman will have them ready for their, home run effort here, and they could blow through the rating I have. That's the only thing that's stopping me from making a much bigger bet on Virginia Commonwealth. For now, a little bit on them, maybe a little bit more than a little bit, but that's it. Iowa and Grand Canyon, I hope I'm not going too fast for people, but I'm kind of a manic mess in my normal state of mind, so this is actually pretty slow for me. So Iowa and Grand Canyon, I made Iowa 11, and I know that may seem low to all you out there, but Iowa has hit a rating that's almost unfathomable for the program. This is the absolute home run team. I have them rated at 97. In years past, they've been high 80s. Sometimes low 90s. I'm happy about that. Fran McCaffrey, the coach, is a UPenn grad, so I have to be happy when anyone in my alma mater does well. However, Bryce Drew at Grand Canyon knows what he's doing. Yes, Bryce Drew, the famous Valparaiso, Mississippi game, when Dad ran a play for him and they threw the home run pass and kicked it back out, and he hit a 3 to beat Mississippi. That was... wow, a long time ago. Boy, I'm getting old. Rod Barnes coached Mississippi then. He's at Bakersfield now. That's, oof. Yes, some babbling. I love it. Now we're getting into it. Anyway, back to the task at hand, trying to figure out who's going to win this fucking game. So Grand Canyon began the year with a lot of acclaim, but really never showed it. In fact, they never really got good till the conference tournament. And now the question is the 2 games in the conference tournament enough to get their rating up there where they're worth betting in this game? And to me, the answer is yes. Not with a lot of pizzazz, but their win over New Mexico State, who I gave them no chance to beat, was very, very impressive. They did it the right way. And the night before against Seattle, a very well-coached team who had an 8-0 lead and quickly was down 20, again was very, very impressive. It could be that maybe he was playing a little possum during the year. That's not a bad strategy for a mid-major because winning the conference means shit, but winning the conference tournament gets you in the NCAA. So hiding a little bit of what you're doing is not such a bad thing. And perhaps Bryce Drew did that. I did not watch either game. I cannot tell you. I did watch some of their play during the year. I know he throws a matchup zone out there, which I don't think will work very well against Iowa. But he has a myriad of defenses that he can use. He's definitely capable of controlling the tempo. And he definitely has a 7-footer who's a humongous human to make Garza's life a little miserable. So there's little subtle things here that favor Grand Canyon. The coach is terrific. They can slow the game down. They have someone to combat Garza at least. They have another 6'11" guy, too, in case he gets in foul trouble. So, and Iowa is playing at their absolute max rating. Like, they have nowhere to go but down. And that could happen. So Grand Canyon plus 15 is worth some sort of bet. not a humongous one in case the two games in the conference tournament were, I don't want to say chimera, that's not quite right, but a mirage maybe. But then we were giving credence to some shit hotel. So unless it was a smoke screen, there you go. Yes. That's that. Michigan plays the winner of Mount St. Mary's, Texas Southern. It should be a very easy game for them. I would make the game around, well, there's no livers, so 24-ish, maybe a little more because it's a team that has only a day's rest to play a game, and that'll hurt them a little bit. LSU and St. Bonnie, the dreaded 8-9 matchup. And I'm not going to get into the committees fucking over St. Bonnie and Loyola Chicago because I don't have a lot of time to do that. And I'll direct you to a interview I did in Memphis today that will get into that a little bit more. But the committee as usual, did their job on the two mid-majors or the two non-power schools that had a good chance to make a run, which were St. Bonnie and Loyola Chicago, especially Loyola Chicago. It's probably the most disgusting seating in all my life. And that's really saying something because they've done some real scary shit over the years. But, hey, the almighty dollar matters, and it doesn't matter if you're fair. That's the way they look at it. They couldn't be any more wrong, by the way, but I'm not going to get into that right now. Let's try to look at this game a little bit. I made LSU 1.5. Talent-wise, LSU lays over St. Bonnie. They have elite talent. But Will Wade doesn't always get the most out of it. Their effort sometimes is a little lacking, but it's kind of scary, the talent they have compared to what the talent St. Bonnie has. However, there is Mark Schmidt on the St. Bonnie sideline. Maybe top 5 coach in the country. Certainly number 1 at player development. I don't recall a player there that hasn't got better from a freshman to a senior. He's just absolutely incredible. He's absolutely brilliant. In his first game especially, where he has a lot of time to prepare, he will have something that LSU won't be able to deal with for sure. So LSU lays over him athletically. Not that St. Bonnie's bad athletically. It's just that there's a difference between elite and very good, and LSU is elite, and St. Bonnie is very good. But Schmidt versus Wade is a complete mismatch, and I'd only bet St. Bonaventure, but I'm not taking 1.5. It's just not enough of a. It's just not enough. I mean, up around 3 probably would get me, just so you know. I guess that's an FYI. Is that the modern way of doing it? Yeah. Okay. We have Colorado and Georgetown. So we're going to have some parallels here to a later game. But for now, let's talk about this. Colorado's program has just blown through prior incantations of the team. Last year, they were just immense, but got screwed because of COVID. And this year, once again, Boyle has just done an amazing job, and his team just continues to impress. Sure, they won a lot of home games at altitude, but they also won a lot of games elsewhere, too. They're the real deal. Losing to Oregon State in the conference tournament final is no debacle. They probably had a lot less pizzazz for the game than Oregon State, and had already beaten them, and just that was it. Georgetown, going into the conference tournament, you wouldn't have dreamed that you'd see them on any line in this bracket. They won 4 in a row. They beat Marquette, but when you read about Marquette, Wojciechowski there said that for some reason his team didn't show up, and Georgetown ran out to a big lead and murdered them. Game 2 was against Villanova, who is now down their point guard, Gillespie, and the backup was a little shaky too. He was a little hurt. He did play, but he was a little hurt. And Georgetown trailed 11 or so with about 7 minutes to go and led on a late run and got the lead and held on. Excellent. Now Seton Hall came, and Seton Hall had just played St. John's overtime the day before in a riveting game that just was a complete brutal to the wire. No one ever had much of a lead in the game. Bloodbath, and had nothing left the next day, and Georgetown took advantage. Now comes the finals, where actually something similar happened. Creighton played UConn the day before, a very physical team that will make your life miserable. They play super hard and super physical, and Creighton had nothing left in the tank against Georgetown. We can go conspiracy theory and say that the number 1 goal of the Big East was to make Georgetown relevant again, but that would be detracting from what Georgetown did. Ewing switched things up a little bit, and his team found some confidence, and they won 4 in a row. However, trouble lurks here because Colorado is Not a team they're familiar with. It's not part of a sequence of 4 games in a row against teams that were not at their best. Colorado will be at their best. The line on this game would have been about 8 before the conference tournament started. You can see the line now at 5. I'd say that's an overreaction. I'd say what Georgetown did is, albeit impressive on the surface, if you read between the lines from what I said, they had reasons to win all those games. Yes, they went and did it, but I'm not so sure it means all that much. I am on Colorado -5 for kind of a medium-ish bet, maybe a little bit more, because it certainly feels like they should kill them to me. Feels like a pretty big mismatch to me. Florida State and NC Greensboro, as we move along in the East here. I didn't tell everybody we switched to the East, but I'm running out of time. So if you ask Wes Miller, the coach of Greensboro, what team don't you want to face? He would probably say Florida State. So, surprise, the committee has stuck them with Florida State. So the reason being is Greensboro presses, and presses a lot, and uses their wave of athletes to overwhelm you at times. That'll work in the Southern Conference where they play. That will not work against Florida State, who has athletes galore, won't mind the press at all. In fact, they might even revel in it. Just a horrific matchup for Greensboro, who is not going to change their ways, and they do press with smarts. I'm not saying that they're some ragtag team. That's not even close. But what they do will be less effective against Florida State, and since part of their rating is kind of the unique take on what they do, I would say that even though I have the game 8, and that's all I have it, I am not taking 11 with Greensboro. I just doesn't feel like they have a chance here. It feels like Florida State is capable of doing better than what they do at the same game. So they have better players. They're not as well coached. Don't get me wrong. Greensboro's a much better coach, but Florida State's athletes are just at a really, really high level. And that's what they've done for years. They've just thrown athletes out there, and Leonard Hamilton says, go play. And they do. And they succeed. BYU will play the winner of Michigan State UCLA, which is a good draw for them, considering they don't deserve to be a 6 seed. They don't have to beat either one of those teams. That's for another day. Trouble lurks later for BYU. On to Texas and Abilene Christian. Well, here we go. So Joe Golding, Abilene Christian. It wasn't long ago this team was in Division II. Think about that. It wasn't long ago they're in Division II, and now this is their second year making the NCAA tournament. In fact, I think it's back-to-back because the COVID year doesn't count. So I kind of think they were in the tournament before. I'd have to check that. But so they had this terrific year both last year and the year before that, and found Kentucky in the first round and found them down 20 about 10 minutes into the game. It was just over. So why won't the same thing happen here? Well, my number in this game is 6, so that kind of tells you something. Is 6 an accurate portrayal of what these two teams really are? I know I'm right about Texas. I've had them at 94.5 for almost the entire year. So that is etched in stone. Now, Abilene Christian, I guessed around, I could actually look at it. I guess they'd be an 80. And since I have the game 6, I now have them an 88.5. So how did that happen? Well, they started off crushing East Tennessee State, who had a new coach and a lot of new players, so we tossed that game. But then Austin Peay on a neutral court, they beat them, and that is impressive. Austin Peay had a very good team returning, and that was a very good win. But I'm going to go a few games later at Texas Tech, where Abilene Christian basically played them right to the wire. They ultimately lost by 10, but the game was on 2 very late in the game, and that is it. That is what I'm honing in on. I know Texas is a different animal than Texas Tech, but power rating-wise, they're very similar. If Abilene Christian can hang at Texas Tech, why not hang on a neutral court against Texas? The answer is, of course they can. Joe Golding is brilliant. I am sure he will have them ready for whatever Texas can throw at him. It might be that Texas is just too athletic for him. We will find out because I have Abilene Christian's rating at some astronomical number, but it's hard not to give them that. And if you just go off that game at Texas Tech, they certainly could be an 88 rating because that's what they played to in that game. They played even higher, actually. I have Texas Tech around 95. So if you give them 3 for home or 2.5 at home, whatever you want, the game still played to like 5 or 6. So this is a very, very good version of Abilene Christian. The coach is just amazing. He will have a much bigger job after this game, or the second game or the third game, depending on how many they win. The draw is not that bad. They could win a bunch of games, or they can win 2. They can't beat Alabama. So, yes, Abilene Christian +9 is a pretty big bet for moi. Alabama, Connecticut, Maryland's next. So here's the caution. I make Connecticut 5, but I have a big circle around it because R.J. Cole, the point guard for Connecticut, got knocked out of the Creighton game with a concussion with 5 minutes to go. When I read the paper today, he was still in protocol. Not good. He is a transfer from a MEAC school. He's just done work miracles there. I never dreamed that this kid could be a legit point guard in the Big East, but he's just done a terrific job. Yes, they have Book Knight back and healthy, and yes, they've gotten a lot better since he got back and been healthy. But without R.J. Cole, you cannot lay 3 points with Connecticut against Maryland. Maryland, excellent job by Turgeon this year. I'm not a big fan of his, but he did a really good job taking a very small lineup and doing some good stuff with it, stuff that he normally hasn't done in years past. They've had a lot of monster efforts on the road, no less, so that bodes well for a tournament setting. My number's Connecticut 5 if R.J. Cole plays, so obviously I'd be looking to lay 2.5. But the coach, Coach Hurley for Connecticut, has said, I have no idea what I'm going to get out of this team. So he's a little they've been a little erratic, and you know, he's a straight shooter, so I take him at his word. I would expect them to play well. It is the NCAA tournament. But Maryland has done stuff to teams to make their lives miserable, and I could see it happening here. That being said, since my number is 5, and I'm not into really matchups, I am going to bet Connecticut, but I'd want to know that R.J. Cole is healthy for sure. Alabama or Iona, my number is Alabama 14, but I'm not betting Iona plus any number. Alabama, to me, is a threat to win the whole thing. One of the few teams, maybe the only team I think that could beat Gonzaga. In fact, I think they are the only team that can beat Gonzaga. I guess Illinois has some chance, but I'm not so sure of that. But this team can just bomb threes in at a very high rate, and 3 beats 2, and they've had games where they've beaten excellent teams by 30. Like, I don't want any part of Iona here. They're kind of in over their heads. Yes, Pitino's a great story, and he's done an excellent job, and he's just a really smart basketball coach, and has Iona playing to a much higher rate than one would have dreamed, especially with a 51-day lockdown and then another lockdown. And just as a side note, I mean, Pitino's going to be rumored for all these openings, like Minnesota and Indiana and maybe others. I think he stays at Iona. He said he wants to create the Gonzaga of the East there, and I actually believe him. I think he's accomplished everything he possibly could in basketball, and now to build a mid-major into a power, I think would be the final, bucket list, final thing on his bucket list that he has. So I think he's staying there. He's a New York guy. I think he'll stay in New Rochelle and work miracles there. So that's my side note. As for this game, I'm not betting it. Baylor Hartford, I think should be about 29.5 or 29. It's 26. When these high numbers come, it's kind of a random thing. It's more how much does Baylor want to win by? When do they rest their starters? Is the back door going to be there? And I'm very uncomfortable laying or taking 26. First, let's give props to John Gallagher at Hartford, who is wildly respected in the coaching field. And watching his team play, you could tell why. He has Tracy Carter, a Marquette transfer, who's his only legit athlete, really. The rest of the players are in way over their heads here. But, his teams don't give away much. And he's capable of tricking them with, some junk defenses. And he even brought out a 1-3-1 in the conference tournament finale to help, blow the game open. So he's excellent coach. He runs a lot of intricate stuff that's hard to deal with, but it doesn't matter if the team's just getting every rebound or stealing the ball or, picking passes off, and that's what's going to happen here. This is going to be a dunk fest or 3-point shooting fest for Baylor, and I'd only bet the favorite here. I expect it to be a 30 or 40-point game for Baylor, sadly. North Carolina, Wisconsin in the battle of opposites. We have mega fast North Carolina against grinded out Wisconsin. Wisconsin, another team with 5 starters back to start the year. Got their rating way up there and then kind of leveled off to where they belong. Not impressed with Wisconsin. Lost a lot of games they should have played better in at year's end. That being said, they ain't playing much. This is the typical clueless North Carolina team that even with their excess of big men, refuse to throw the ball inside. Like, it's just so weird. So, which style wins? Well, the team that wants to play slow is always going to get the game slowed down. So Wisconsin's going to get the tempo they want. But they're completely out-athleted here, and it's just a matter of whether their intelligence and their ability to make North Carolina's miserable by playing a half-court game, which should frustrate North Carolina, I would think, is enough to overcome the talent gap. Maybe, but I made North Carolina 2 and really feel like North Carolina should be a little bit bigger favorite. My gut says they really kind of lay over this team, but they got better a little bit at the end of the year, but it's not a great version of North Carolina. And, I wouldn't fuck with Greg Gard as an underdog, so I'm leaving it alone. Villanova and Winthrop, everyone's darling pick to pull the upset is Winthrop, and with good reason. Pat Kelsey, an amazing job there. He uses many players playing not a lot of minutes. I love that approach to basketball. It gives them more family-type style, which is how mid-majors should work. You should have that family feel approach. You should have the team approach because it's the only way you're going to win. You're always going to be the second-best athletic team in an NCAA tournament. So you need something, cohesion, smarts, focus, feel good. And all that stuff works. And it so happens that Kelsey has some good players too, which doesn't hurt. And he runs terrific offense. They got a lot of wide open threes, and Villanova is without their leader. Not only the leader for Villanova, this is Gillespie's a major loss. Connor Gillespie, I think that's his name. Again, I'm not good with players or what the teams do, but since he got hurt in the Providence game and they lost to Providence, who didn't have a very good year, and then they lost to Georgetown, as we talked about earlier, blowing an 11-point lead in the conference tournament. So Gillespie is their leader. He's also the kind of their glue guy. It's unusual for a guy to be the point guard and control the offense, but he also sort of controls the defense too. And his loss is just massive as he's relevant on both sides of the ball. The ball is always in his hands. He's a very, very clever ball handler. He gets a lot of good shots for his teammates. He doesn't always take the best shot himself, I will say that, but a lot of them go in. So, I'm not knocking this kid. This kid really made himself quite the player and quite the leader, and his loss is huge. That being said, do you really want to take 6.5 points with a Big South team against a program that's elite? And the answer to me is no. As much as I feel like Winthrop has an excellent chance to win this game, the reality is this is Villanova's an elite program, albeit down there probably key cog, and they're playing a team that just had an unbelievable year. I mean, Winthrop beat Furman by 100. Like, that just doesn't happen. Furman's excellent, and Winthrop just made mincemeat out of them, as they did almost every team they played this year. But they haven't played a Villanova, and it might be a little rougher for them to get what they want against Villanova. And I think the injury to Gillespie, although it has hurt them the first 2 games, with time to get ready, this is still Villanova. This is still Jay Wright. This is still a team that has plenty of talent. And to think they're just going to lay over here or not be good enough to beat Winthrop is sheer lunacy. So I'm leaving it alone. And, good luck to all the Winthrop bettors. I think it actually might be the sucker side. Purdue and North Texas. Side note, when North Texas won their conference tournament, I turned to my friend who I was watching it with and said, they're going to play either Creighton or Purdue in the first round. Voila. The committee is very predictable. So why Purdue or Creighton? Because North Texas figured to be somewhere in the 12, 13 seed range, and Creighton and Purdue both figured to be 4 or 5 seeds, something like that. So that's why I figured it'd be Purdue or Creighton, but there's other reasons. North Texas is a supremely intelligent team. Grant McCaslin, a name you might not know, but just an amazing coach, just has brought this program from the pits. Haha, they play in the pit, by the way. To the NCAA tournament almost in no time, and does it with a team that gives nothing away. They play excellent defense. They run good offense. They take good shots. It's I watched them play Loyola Chicago. It was almost a joy to watch. But why would I think they play Purdue or Creighton? Because both Purdue and Creighton are very intelligent teams who have better players. So North Texas, who could maybe beat some of these other teams, like a Oak State or maybe even a Florida State, probably won't beat Purdue. And I say probably because now there's other issues. This is a this is a very experienced North Texas team. I shouldn't say senior dominant because I really don't know. I know they have almost all upperclassmen because they've been there a while. And Purdue relies on 3 freshmen. The men against the boys in the NCAA tournament is a good dynamic to look for. You want to bet experienced players against freshmen in the NCAA tournament, and that's what you have here. You have Purdue relying on 3 freshmen, North Texas not. So my number in the game is 6.5, but I'd only bet North Texas. With not knocking Matt Painter, who I absolutely love, and they're hard to deal with too. They run a very, very intricate offense. That's very hard to prepare for, but this is Grant McCaslin preparing for it. So both teams will be ready. It'll be a great game to watch. I highly recommend watching this game. If you want to watch basketball that might not be at its prettiest, unless you're a basketball purist and really see what's going on, because the game's going to be 55-50 probably. So North Texas or nobody, and the hint would be that if it went up, I would be looking to bet North Texas. Texas Tech and Utah State, another terrific coaching battle. Craig Smith for Utah State, it just has blown them through Stu Morrill's ratings. Stu Morrill, one of my all-time favorites. They're playing to numbers that wouldn't even be dreamed of in Logan. Texas Tech, Chris Beard, we all know he's the man. But this has not been a very good year for Texas Tech. They've won some miracle games, 12 down with a minute to go against LSU, won in overtime, and then way behind against Texas and rallied late as Texas choked that game away. It's not been a great year for them, and they're not overwhelmingly talented. I mean, he's a terrific coach. So I made the game 2, and I bet Utah State +5 for quite a bit. And I just think that Chris Beard kind of says, here's what we're doing, beat us, a la Tony Bennett, because what he does is really good. He tweaks things once in a while, but Utah State has a lot more diversity to what they do and a lot more ability to do different things, especially with Cada there in the middle. He's just an unmovable force and has made himself a terrific basketball player. Having him in the court can hide a lot of deficiencies, allows them to more aggressively go after Texas Tech's guards. It allows them to do a lot of stuff, and Smith knows what to do with every bit of it. Really just a terrific coach. I'm a little concerned. When they last made the tournament, Utah State came in with a lot of regard and played Washington and got run out of the gym. I think they were just kind of worn out from a long season of playing at a very, very high level. This has been a less taxing season in some ways because they haven't played as many games. I would expect Utah State, who's had a pretty clean run here, injury, a minor injury here and there, to be very, very ready for this. And I think they have a very good chance to pull the upset and maybe even more along the way. So this is a good one. If the game goes back up to even 4.5, I'd be betting Utah State. Arkansas and Colgate, and here we go again. Matt Langle, a UPenn grad, has worked miracles at a Patriot League school. My number in this game is only 6.5, and the game opened 10.5, and my eyes lit up, and then it quickly got belted down to 9, and then even belted down some more. I did ask the gentleman who does the betting to take +9, and is it with a lot of alacrity, or that's a misuse of the words, a lot of fervor maybe, or with alacrity, let's say it that way. I'm not sure. My gut says Colgate can win the game, but they're a hard team to evaluate. They've only played Patriot League games the entire year. Have they been impressive in those games? Yes. At times they just look unstoppable. They run just terrific offense, and it'll be very, very, very difficult for Arkansas to deal with the constant screening and moving and the great angles that they take on their cuts, and just really they run beautiful offense, and they have an array of shooters to hit all these threes. And if we go back a few years when Burns was much younger, Burns is their senior point guard, was just amazing. You will find them in the first round against Tennessee as like a, I forget, 16, 17-point underdog. And the game was on 2 very late. I think they lost by 7, I want to say. I don't remember. 7 or 8, something like that. But the game was on too late, and they were legit. This wasn't a freak occurrence. The one thing missing, and I have this Colgate team rated higher than that team, but the rating is a little uncertain. Colgate had a big guy there, I think a big long name, and he was the anchor of the defense, and they don't have anything like that right now. That could be a recipe for Arkansas to have a free fall at the rim and just bury him there. However, I would take Matt Langle against Eric Musselman any day of the week, and Musselman is also dealing with a lot of young players, and I talked about how I like to bet against young players in the NCAA tournament. Yes, the athletic gap is probably pretty severe, but I think the coaching gap is too, the other way, and I am all over Colgate +9, and I think they have an excellent chance to win the game. On to Florida and VPI. Yes, the old school Boston talking VPI. That's what they used to call the Hokies or the Gobblers or whatever the hell they are now. Speaking of coaching mismatches, we bring you Mike Young versus Mike White. Mike Young, formerly of Wofford, back to his alma mater. I never thought he'd leave Wofford, but Virginia Tech was probably the only school he'd go to, and good for him. So his Wofford talent got him to some pretty amazing places, but now he has Virginia Tech type talent, and it'll only get better. Beware ACC, you're going to have a new power within 2 years, and it'll be Virginia Tech, I assure you. He's just started. This year's team's been a little shaky, a little bit of a danger. They haven't played many games. They came out of a COVID lockdown pretty late in the year. The game against North Carolina in the ACC tournament wasn't as bad as it seems. The game was tied with 8 minutes to go. There was a clean block made. They called a foul on Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech went crazy. They lost a little focus. North Carolina ran off 8 in a row. Game over. Of course, North Carolina needed that game to get in the tournament, so, no comment. I made this game pick. I'd only bet Virginia Tech because I just can't stomach watching Florida play with Mike White coaching. But, the game is pick, and yeah, I'm not so sure there's any bargain. I'm sure Virginia Tech will be ready for their best, and their best was blowing Virginia out at home. But Florida's best is also pretty impressive too. They have some high level talent there. It's just that they don't always get the most out of it. So it's Virginia Tech and nobody. And for now, I'm just going to leave it alone, and maybe Florida will go back to the favorite, and I'll maybe invest a little bit. Ohio State and Oral Roberts. Interesting game. I have Ohio State a 12.5 point favorite. 12.5 on a neutral sometimes plays a little higher, so I'm not bombing Oral Roberts +17, but I am betting Oral Roberts +17. Kind of a strange team. They don't defend at all. Not a recipe for goodness in an NCAA tournament. But they have 7 guys who can hit. Is it 7? It might be. They hit 14 out of 26 threes in their semifinal, and I just keep they shoot threes, and that's what they're going to do, and they do it, and they hit them. And when you can hit a lot of threes, you can hang in +17. That's for sure, even if you're not playing very good defense. As a bonus, one of Ohio State's best defenders will be out for this game. Ohio State has had a home run year, but they also are in their conference tournament finale. This will be maybe a tricky game emotionally for them to be 100% all in for. And if they're not 100% ready, Oral Roberts is going to bomb these threes in and probably hang pretty good with them. So I have a medium-ish type bet on Oral Roberts +17 and would expect it to have a very good chance of covering. With a little scared of the fact that Ohio State will probably have a easy time scoring themselves. But 17 is a lot for a team that's as capable of scoring as Oral Roberts is. And we are down to one final bracket, the Midwest, Illinois and Drexel. I'll keep this succinct. There's nothing Drexel can do to stop the onslaught here. I made this game 26.5. I kind of missed the good numbers, so I'm debating whether I actually want to lay 22 or not. I'll probably just leave it alone and get on with my life. I don't need to say any more there. There's nothing Drexel can do to stop Illinois. So on to Loyola, Chicago, Georgia Tech, and I'll probably spend the most time on this one, or probably not. I don't think either team can be very happy with what's transpired here. As discussed prior, Loyola, Chicago got completely fucked by the committee. Why? I don't know. Why they want to fuck this team, I don't know. They've done this to mid-majors throughout the history of the NCAA tournament. But Loyola Chicago made the Final Four not long ago, and we had the whole Sister Jean dynamic, and she's still alive. And I don't know why they'd want to shut us out of that. Like, it was such a great story then, and it still is. But more importantly, they claim to follow this thing called the net, and the net ranking of Loyola Chicago is 10. T-E-N, 10. So if you give 4 1 seeds and 4 2 seeds, that's 8. So what's that leave? That leaves 9 through 12 as 3 seeds. So why is Loyola not a 3 seed if they think this net ranking is so fucking relevant? That's a good question. Personally, I think 3 is too high for Loyola Chicago. But they would be favored over 3 out of the 4 6 seeds in this tournament. And I could actually take a peek at the 5s and see how they'd stack up against them. So they'd be favored over 1-5, pick with another, and dog to the other 2. So they're between a 5 and a 6, which is exactly where I have them on my ratings. One thing they're not is an 8. So why would the committee stick them with an 8? Well, we have 4 elite 1 seeds. If you can avoid the 1 seed, you have a chance of advancing very far in this tournament. Loyola is not going to avoid a 1 seed. And for their troubles, they get Georgia Tech, a team riding high after winning the ACC tournament. Now, Josh Pastner can't be happy himself. In fact, if I were him, I'd be furious. There's no ACC tournament winner that's ever been a 9 seed, nothing resembling a 9 seed. They're 3 to 5 at the worst, and maybe even higher, like 1 to 5 is probably the ACC tournament winner, not 9. Not only is Georgia Tech a 9, but also they had a tremendous resume going in. Before they even won the ACC tournament, they were in the tournament. So how is this team a 9 seed? Is that about where they belong by my power ratings? Yes. By about what the committee does? No. So this whole game, this whole 8-9 game is a sham. Georgia Tech runs this 1-3-1 zone that morphs into what I believe is a box and one with Alvarado as the 1. So Alvarado goes and hounds the ball handler, or more importantly, I think he hounds the guy who's most likely to take the shot. It's a very, very ever-changing defense that kind of matches the shape of what the offense is doing. It's very, very creative. It's caused teams fits, especially out of conference, or maybe not out of conference, because early in the year out of conference, Georgia Tech did not fare that well. However, they got a lot better at this tricked-up zone that they're running. The problem is, on the other side of the ledger, we have Porter Moser, a Rick Majerus disciple, and a genius, just a basketball genius. He will solve this wacky zone that Georgia Tech throws out there. And I think that they will have no problem in dispatching Georgia Tech. There's also the possibility that Moses Wright, who's the ACC Player of the Year, might miss the game for Georgia Tech. At worst, he's not 100%. So the number kind of got away. It went from 2 to 3. My number on the game's 3.5, but my gut says Loyola wins by a lot. So I will be betting Loyola -3 for something. Not a lot, but I probably should because my gut's usually not wrong. Now on to the game we are going to bet a lot on, and then we're going to fly through it after this. So this is it. I made Tennessee 12 over Oregon State. There is the question of Fulkerson, their big guy who got whacked in the face and had a surgery to repair his face. Whether he's going to play or not, well, he's practicing with the team. I don't see why he won't. Oregon State, props to them. Props to Wayne Tinkle. Just an amazing job this year, turning this very, very low-rated team into a conference tournament winner. Again, a la Georgetown, they caught some apathetic teams. Maybe not UCLA, but they were down 16 to UCLA before UCLA did what they've always done and choked the game away. And finally, they beat Oregon game 2, who had just bludgeoned them the last game of the year at Oregon State, but Oregon hit 13 out of 25 threes in that game. So they got payback there against what was likely kind of an apathetic Oregon team who had won the Pac-12 title. And then Colorado in the final, even Boyle said, that wasn't our best effort. So props to Oregon State for doing amazing things, but they are clearly in over their heads here. It doesn't take much to go back and remember the beginning of the year when everyone was talking about how great Tennessee was. And I'm going to point out one game. Their first conference game was at Missouri. They were a 4.5-point favorite, and they won by 20. Now, if you're 4.5 on the road at Missouri in a conference game, the first one where everyone's all in on the game, you're going to have no problem with an Oregon State team. Yes, Tinkle's amazing. He'll mix the defenses up. I'm sure he'll make Tennessee's life miserable if he gets it into a half-court game. But I'm not sold he will. The athletes for Tennessee are overwhelming. They've played very few games lately, which Rick Barnes talked about as mandatory. They were getting a little worn down. He has 2 freshmen who played a lot of minutes. So the fact that they've only played 3 games in the last 3 weeks will be very helpful to this team. They had a 15-point lead without Fulkerson against Alabama. That's really saying something. If they can get 15 ahead of Alabama, they're going to get way ahead of Oregon State. If Oregon State does manage to not turn it over and get this into a half-court game, I guess they have a chance to hang in there. I don't think that'll happen. I think Tennessee's defense is just too good for what Oregon State has. There'll be a lot of steals and a lot of dunks and a lot of money made by all of us who are laying 8 with Tennessee, which is what I'm doing, and that is the best bet of the tournament for me. Oklahoma State Liberty, another high seed that is not thrilled with the draw. Oak State's last 7 games were they had to get the pardon to play this game first. They were on a postseason ban, which magically disappeared because of Cade Cunningham's one-and-doneness. He is an amazing talent. The team is excellent. They got likely back their point guard from a many-game miss of injury. They played great at the end of the year. However, that may work against them here. Their last 7 games were 2 against Texas Tech, 2 against Baylor, 2 against West Virginia, and 1 against Oklahoma, if my memory serves me right, which it often doesn't. But the point being is they played 7 top 20 teams to end the year, and now they're playing Liberty. As the dynamic just lends itself to subconsciously them struggling with this game. And not only struggling maybe effort-wise, but also they are facing a team that's very, very tricky, that will not be intimidated, that earlier this year, Liberty in their pre-conference slaughtered South Carolina, slaughtered Mississippi State, went to Purdue and hung for a long way, lost a close game to TCU in a neutral, which right now does not look very good, but most relevantly, went on the road at Missouri shortly thereafter when Missouri was having a very easy time of it with all their players back, and played them pretty much to the wire. Got away from them very late in the game. Liberty plays a version of the pack line defense. Props to Richie McKay for changing up his approach over the years and modernizing it a little bit. He extends the pack line more than Virginia, where he learned this from Tony Bennett, and he tweaks things for what he has to work with. Just a superb coach who can muck the game up with the best of them. The team can hit threes from anywhere and has so at a high rate. If Oak State's not careful, this could be a very ugly loss for them. And although I did not bet the game because the number got belted out pretty quickly, Liberty definitely has a good chance to pull the upset. San Diego State and Syracuse. I was kind of back and forth on this one, and ultimately, after I took some edibles and thought about games in a stone state, I came up with, I think, the winning formula here. Syracuse, not many years ago, had a playing game with Arizona State, which they won, and then went on to make a little run there. That year, they were ravaged by injuries and stuck some new players in around January. And Boeheim's zone is very effective, but also very nuanced. It takes a long time to learn the nuances of that zone. Syracuse has not, like most schools, not had a shit ton of games this year, and got better as the year went on, especially at the end of the year. They were playing their best ball. I think that's a result of teams learning that zone better. So where does that leave San Diego State? They don't see anything resembling this in their conference. Dutcher does a great job, and they're very hard to beat. They're very, very well coached. They don't give away anything. Their defense is excellent, but their defense is kind of I'm picturing it as kind of a pack line too. And Syracuse shoots a lot of threes and sometimes hits them. But most importantly, San Diego State's sort of offensively challenged, and they'll really be offensively challenged if Syracuse has this zone intact, which I think they do. My number in the game is San Diego State 3.5, but I think Syracuse is going to beat them. And if the game got to 3.5, I'd be betting Syracuse. So that's what I finally decided. West Virginia, Morehead State, my favorite coach, Bob Huggins. Morehead State, Preston Spradlin, Cal Parry guy. And in fact, he uses the dribble drive. I watched them play this year, but he kind of clears out for dribble drives. It's a little different variation of what Calipari does, which is pretty much nothing. But I just don't see West Virginia having any problem defending it. When Oscar Schwebe quit the team, I think that's his name, Huggins went to a more spaced out perimeter look, and his offense has become mega efficient as the year closed out. It is Bob Huggins. It's very capable of happening. You don't usually hear wildly efficient offenses in him. He's a very good defensive player, but he's also a very good offensive coach. He's just the best. He really is. He's the best. The man changes things on a fly to have his players to make it best for what he has to work with. He's just absolutely fantastic. I don't see what Morehead can do to really trouble this team at all, either offensively or defensively. And they're very good defensively, but West Virginia's offense has been just at another level. And I would expect West Virginia to have a pretty comfortable go of it here. The line is right. I made it 13, and it's 12.5, but it's the favorite or nobody. Clemson and Rutgers. Clemson started the year like a house of fire, shocking me and causing me a severe loss of money as they continued to play at a level I couldn't believe. Strangely enough, Rutgers, on the other hand, as they got healthier, got worse. Strange, but true. So I made this game Rutgers 2 and possibly 2.5. I would have laid pick for a lot, and I'm debating laying 1. Reason being, Clemson had a late COVID lockdown, and since that COVID lockdown, they have not been the same team as prior. And that's happened a lot this year, where teams have gone into lockdowns and come out not as good, and sometimes come out better. It's almost like a new season with a new set of power ratings. So I think Rutgers has an upside. I think Clemson has a downside. So the number 2 could actually become 3, and maybe even 3.5. And Rutgers with Piquel, who's Bowles from Ohio U's old boss, just fantastic coach. I love Brad Burnell too. Don't get me wrong. He's worked miracles with this team, but I would expect Rutgers to beat him, and we'll probably bet something on Rutgers at some point, not a lot. And finally, Houston, Cleveland State to wrap up our attempt at a podcast, which I hope isn't as bad as I think it's become. Dennis Gates, Cleveland State, just an amazing job. He had not a lot to work with. We're almost done. So we'll be out of here soon. Dennis Gates, Cleveland State, just another guy who adapted this family mentality to a mid-major thing. He wants to get recruits who weren't widely recruited, so they have a little chip on their shoulder. And listen to one of his press conferences. He's really a joy to listen to. He's a real throwback to the old days of what's right is right and what's wrong is wrong. I just love listening to him. I love watching his teams play. That being said, he's in a world of shit here. His teams play super hard, but so does in Houston, and Houston's athletes are just unrelenting and overwhelming. They've blown way better teams out than Cleveland State, and I wouldn't be surprised if they blew Cleveland State out also. However, I think Cleveland State does have one way to combat some of this. He does switch defenses often, and he has Eichelberger, who he's brought off the bench this year, but good things happen when Eichelberger touches the ball. When he's on the court, they run everything through him. He's a big, lumbering center who actually is pretty nimble and very, very athletic. He doesn't look the part, but he is. I'm not a basketball expert, but I think he's Cleveland State's best shot. When he has the ball, good things happen. And I can picture, even with Houston's athletes making their lives miserable, that when Eichelberger has the ball, he's very, very hard to stop one-on-one. He's very, very tricky. He's very clever. He's very smart. He's a great passer. If they run everything through him and let him play, 35 minutes if it's possible, his foot injury is a lot better now. Maybe Cleveland State can stay within 15. But other than that, it's a complete, mismatch, as a lot of Houston games are. And, I fear for Cleveland State, who's not a good outside shooting team, having hit a lot of threes maybe to hang in there. But, I think the Eckelberger angle is legit. They're probably going to get murdered on the boards, too, now that I think about it. Oh, well. Anyway, I made it 20. That's what the line is, so I'm passing. And that's it. And again, this is just, me rifling through, some quick thought on every game. It's not an in-depth, evaluation of each team. And not that I'm even capable of that. This is kind of me kind of winging it here. And I'm hoping, beyond hoping, that at least one person enjoyed this. And what is coming is going to be an historical teaching of and a historical approach to sports betting. We're going to bring back some old guys, if they're still alive, and interview them and talk about the old days of sports betting. And also, I'm hoping, as I said prior, that I can teach people the fundamentals that I taught myself, because I was in a world where there were no computers, where you had to learn by your own. And by doing so, hopefully you can have some fun trying to pick winners yourself. And until then, I bid you adieu, and thanks for listening. And Alan Boston here, signing off. Until next time, cheers.